I thought forgiveness was the end of the pain. It turned out to be just the beginning of a new one I was now inflicting on myself. That day I was paying the bills off Derek's card because mine was buried somewhere at the bottom of my bag, and the payment queue in the app doesn't wait for anyone. I opened the statement and saw a hotel in Austin 2 nights, the exact same week he told me he was on a work trip to Denver. I didn't immediately understand I was looking at proof of anything. I just sat there with my phone in my hands, reading the hotel name over and over, like it might suddenly change on its own. That evening I said nothing. The next day either. I carried it around silently for days, opening the same statement over and over, until finally I set the phone down on the table in front of him and asked him directly what he'd been doing in Austin that week. He didn't argue, didn't try to talk his way out of it. He just went quiet and then admitted it. Once, with a woman he'd known since college, they'd run into each other by chance at a conference, and that's when it happened. I've been a teacher for many years, and in that time I learned how to keep a straight face even when everything inside is burning. That evening, for the first time, that skill came in handy, not in a classroom but at home. I didn't scream or cry in front of him. I just said I needed to think and went to grade 8th grade notebooks. There was class tomorrow, and the kids weren't to blame for what was happening in my house. I spent a month thinking. Derek begged, promised everything I wanted to hear, said he was willing to go to therapy with me, change jobs if it would help, do anything as long as I stayed. I'd look at him and think about our daughter, who was 7 at the time, about how I'd explained to her why Daddy was suddenly moving out, about how I myself had grown up without a father and had sworn my own child would never go through that. In the end I said, let's try. Not because I'd truly forgiven him, but because I couldn't see any other path that wouldn't blow everything up at once. For the first few months after that, I really did try to believe we could make it work. Derek kept his word literally, home from work on the dot, calling if he was even 15 minutes late, showing me his phone messages himself before I even asked. I saw the effort and understood he was genuinely afraid of losing us. But something inside me wouldn't let go, no matter how hard he tried. And over time I started to understand the problem wasn't whether I believed him anymore. The problem was that I couldn't stop. I started checking his phone while he was in the shower. Rarely at first, almost by accident, then more and more often, almost every night once he'd fallen asleep. I'd scroll through his messages with coworkers, looking for hidden meaning in every text, analyzing why exactly that one colleague had messaged him so late, even if it was just a routine work report. Derek never hid anything, handed me his phone himself whenever he saw I was getting anxious, said he understood my distrust and was willing to wait as long as it took. But it was exactly that willingness of his to endure it all that irritated me even more. Like part of me wanted to see him get annoyed just once, instead of that constant guilty gentleness. When he ran late on his way home, I'd already be sitting there with my phone, typing out a text I'd end up deleting because I could tell how anxious it sounded. When he went to the store for 15 minutes, I'd calculate the route in my head, and if he was 5 minutes late getting back, my throat would already go dry. I started hating myself for that state more than I ever hated him for cheating, because the cheating had been his doing, but this had become mine, and there was nothing I could do about it, no matter how hard I tried. Our daughter asked me once at dinner why I always looked at Daddy's phone whenever he got up from the table. I told her something about just wanting to check tomorrow's weather, and she believed me because she was 7 and still believed everything I told her. But the simple fact that she'd noticed hit me harder than any fight with Derek ever had. I realized my distrust had long stopped being just my own private problem. It had seeped into the air of our home, and even our daughter could feel it, even if she didn't fully understand what it was. Friends told me I should be proud of myself, that I'd saved the family, that I hadn't given in to the first impulse to walk away, that I'd made a mature adult choice. I'd nod along, though something in me flinched every time at those words, because I didn't feel like I'd saved anything worth having. I felt like I was living every day next to a man I loved and suspected of everything at the same time, and that split was costing me more energy than any open fight ever had. One evening Derek cooked dinner all on his own, no special occasion, just because he felt like it. The 3 of us sat at the table, he was telling some story from work, our daughter was laughing, and for a second I saw exactly the man I'd fallen in love with years ago. I even smiled genuinely, no internal scanning going on at all. And then he mentioned that woman from Austin's name just casually, in the context of something work-related, nothing more. And the smile vanished from my face instantly. I felt my whole body tense up, my thoughts circling around one single question. Was this really just work? Or had something started again? Derek noticed the shift and stopped mid-sentence, and our daughter's eyes moved from him to me, sensing something was wrong without understanding exactly what. That night, lying in the dark, I stared at the ceiling for a long time, trying to remember the last time I'd felt simply calm next to my husband, without any internal checking. I couldn't recall a single evening like that from the entire past year. The turning point came on an ordinary weekday, no holidays, no guests. Our daughter got sick, and I took the day off to stay home with her. Derek went to work as usual, and while I was cleaning out his closet, I found an old gym bag he hadn't used in ages. Inside was a train ticket, from the exact week everything had started, headed exactly to Austin. I stood there holding that ticket and understood. Nothing new had happened. This was just a leftover from that story I'd already known about. But my hands shook anyway, like I was holding fresh evidence, not a 2-year-old yellowed slip of paper. Our daughter called out to me from her room, and I put the ticket back, wiped my face, and went to take her temperature like nothing had happened. But that evening when Derek got home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told him about the bag, about the ticket, about how even the smallest thing from back then could pull me straight back into a state I thought I'd already worked through. He listened quietly, then said softly he hadn't known that bag was still there, that he'd thought we'd left all of it behind us a long time ago. And in that phrase of his, left behind, I suddenly heard something that hit me harder than anything else. He genuinely thought it was over, and I'd been carrying it around every single day, like a stone in my pocket he had no idea even existed. I sat down in the kitchen and, for the first time in a long time, cried not because of him but because of myself. Derek sat down next to me carefully, like he was afraid one wrong move would make things worse, and asked what was really going on with us, why even after all this time, despite everything he was doing, I still couldn't settle down. I didn't answer for a long while, and then I told him the truth I'd been hiding even from myself. I don't know how to trust again. Every time I try, something inside me clenches up and screams that it's dangerous, even when the danger stopped existing a long time ago. The next day, after dropping our daughter off at school, for the first time in all that while I didn't go home, I just walked around the city alone with no destination. I sat on a park bench and thought not about Derek, but about myself, about the woman I'd become lately. Perpetually on guard, perpetually ready to check something, perpetually exhausted by my own mind. I remembered who I'd been before that ticket from Austin, calm, trusting, able to laugh without any second thoughts. And I understood. It hadn't been about whether Derek was capable of never cheating again for a long time now. He genuinely hadn't, as far as I could tell, ever since, and somewhere deep down I knew that. It was about the fact that I myself no longer knew how to live without constantly bracing for a blow. And nothing he did was ever going to fix that, because what had broken wasn't between us, it was inside me. I started seeing a therapist once a week during my lunch break between classes. The first few sessions I only talked about Derek, about the bag, about the hotel statement, about checking his phone. Then my therapist asked me directly, could I picture myself a few years from now still beside him if everything stayed exactly the way it was? I stayed quiet for a long time, then answered honestly, no. Not because he was a bad husband, and not because I hadn't been able to forgive him sincerely enough, but because the affair itself had stopped being the main event in this story a long time ago. What had become the main thing was that I'd turned myself into an investigator in my own home, and there was only one way to fix that, by closing the case for good. I didn't tell Derek about this decision right away. For a few weeks I lived beside him, convincing myself I wasn't wrong, watching myself just as closely as I used to watch him. And every time I confirmed the same thing, even on quiet evenings when nothing was happening, I'd catch myself mentally building an alibi for his day, hunting for inconsistencies that weren't there. This wasn't about trusting him anymore. It was about me, who'd forgotten how to live without suspicion. I told him everything at that same kitchen table where I'd once seen that statement. I said it plainly, no accusations. I'm leaving not because he's done something again, but because I can't keep living in this constant internal war I wage against myself every single day. Derek sat there in silence, his face going pale, then asked quietly if it was final. I said yes. He didn't argue, didn't beg the way he had 2 years earlier. He just said he'd always been afraid of exactly this, that even if he did everything right, it would still end up being too late. We explained it to our daughter as best we could in simple words, that mommy and daddy were going to live apart, but that both of them loved her just as much as always. She cried the first night, then adjusted faster than I expected. Kids can adapt in places where adults stay stuck for a long time. It's been quite a while now since our daughter and I moved out and started living apart from Derek. The first few months I'd wake up at night out of habit, reaching for a phone that wasn't there anymore. And every time I was surprised by that hollow habit, which gradually faded away too. Now I wake up and check nothing, no routes, no messages, no minutes late. Derek picks our daughter up on weekends, we talk calmly, almost like friends, no resentment between us. And for the first time in a long time I fall asleep without that weight in my chest. Not because I no longer trust anyone, but because I finally stopped living in constant expectation of a betrayal that stopped existing a long time ago.